Hello and welcome back to another watercolor teaching segment with Laurel Hart. Before I begin what I planned on painting today, I just wanted to thank all of you for your feedback on the previous videos that we've done. It's been really heartening to hear from so many of you. I've heard from people as far away as Denmark and Korea, and it's just been a great thing to receive your comments, and I've received tips from you, and it's wonderful to belong to such a great brotherhood as we are as artists. We just, in this group, it just transcends all boundaries, nationalities, races, and we're just joined by this same love of being able to create and to show appreciation for the blessing we have of being artists and sharing the things that we love about the world around us. I want to thank my video crew who work really hard to put this together for me. And if you feel so inclined to donate to our little cause, you can find a donation button on my website at laurelhart.com. And I appreciate those of you who have donated and have made it possible for us to keep going on these little videos. I wanted to share a little quote from an artist who said, every day we should thank God for the privilege of being able to see the sun cast shadows. And man, I wish I had come up with that as my artist statement. I just love that idea. And for me, that is really the most exciting thing in my art and in my painting is capturing the light and seeing the beautiful patterns of light and shade that come about through light and shadow in our world of nature. I'd like to begin showing you the subject that I'd like to paint today. And it goes right along with that quotation that because it's all about shadows. And what I would like to talk about today is how to create shadows that are filled with color and believable and connected into a beautiful pattern of a light and shadow shape. And the subject that I am working from today is a photograph that I took in Sedona when we were visiting there last May. My husband and I were on a little trip, and I took several photographs of this beautiful place that we visited. It's probably identifiable to a lot of you who have visited there. It has a really incredibly funny and long name and spelling, so I won't try to pronounce it. But anyway, I was just caught by the gorgeous shadow patterns in this subject. And I'd also like to address the limitations that we have in working from a photograph. As you can see, it flattens these shadows into just kind of one value, this dark. And in reality, shadows are generally full of color. They're much more exciting than we maybe find them in a photograph. So that's what I'm going to be painting today. And I'm going to be trying to show you how you can keep those shadows full of color and full of life so that they don't look quite as dead as they come across in a photograph. So let's begin. I'm going to start with, you can see I've got my drawing on my paper. My paper is a 140-pound weight. This is a Laurel paper that it's a cold press, and I like it because it's just got a nice amount of tooth to it. And the other nice feature about this paper is it dries really nice and flat. And I like that a little bit over arches. Arches tends to buckle just a little bit more. Anyway, let's get started. I'm going to begin with an underpainting or a first wash of a triad of color, and I'll be using as this first triad manganese blue. And then I'll use mostly my yellow ochre and then also alizarin crimson. And I just love the beautiful color in these columns, this warm rosy color against what will be these more cool shadows. And it's just a really beautiful contrast between the warms and the cools. But in starting out, I will keep this painting pretty warm, and then later on come in with more of the cool colors in the shadows. So I've talked about this before in previous videos, but my object in this first wash will be to stay on these values between 1 and 5, because this is the time that I'm going to want to get most of the rich color in there. And color lives pretty much between these values, 3, 4, and 5. So I'm going to stay on this side of the value scale with this first wash. And then when I come back in, I can put in these darker values as I go. And I've shared this tool before, but this is a great little tool because I can come over my painting and determine what value something is in the painting itself as I'm trying to match my values. And it's all about really getting the value right. Color gets the credit, but value really does the work. So I can be off on my color, but if I'm right on my values, it's not going to matter that much. However, I am going to probably not finish up with a value as dark as these shadows are showing in my photograph. They're just a little bit too dark. So I'll start with this first wash, and I'm using a number 10 brush, but I think I'm going to switch and come in with this number 12. So I'm just going to start out with nice juicy puddles of this manganese blue, my alizarin crimson, and notice I'm going to let them kind of bleed together on the palette so that they're mingling. And I'm going to put my yellow ochre over here just because I don't have a lot of mixing room on that over there. So this will help. Okay, so I'm going to start out basically covering everything in this painting that is not in sunlight with this first wash. And I'm not necessarily caring if these colors in here are totally local, the correct local colors. But I do particularly see here that there's going to be a little bit of a bright yellow right there, so I am going to go in with that as kind of what is actually there in the local color. And then what I'm doing is just skipping over everything in here that is not actually in. I'm skipping over everything that is in sunlight. And this urn or whatever this is up here, I'm also going to kind of keep this in what the actual local color is on that. It's this. And the object of this first part of the painting is just to keep these, to keep this wash moving, keep it juicy and fresh and alive, full of a lot of color. I'm going to pop in a little bit of, this is Aureolin, because over here, this yellow is really, really concentrated and vivid up in there, and I'll come back and cover some of that. But it's feeling like there's a little pop of it right over in here too, where those leaves are in the sunshine. And I just want to keep everything moving, so at this point I'm trying not to have too many hard edges yet. I'm going to come down on my on the column here and try to keep this really, really abstract and loose. Again, I'm just going to let that bleed over into these yellows as well as they're coming down on there. But I want to keep this color on the pillar here pretty accurate, because I don't want to spoil that. It's really beautiful. Okay, and I'm gonna kind of treat this as if it's invisible right now and come over into this so that I'm not ending up with hard edges there. Okay, let's see. And I want to soften that edge there by running some water along the edge. Okay, and I'm going to take a little pop of the red to put in here on these flowers. Okay, still trying to step over some of this some of these whites that are here. But down in here, this is going to end up being a dark shadow, so I'm going to just let that bleed into there. And then we've got some of this over in here too that's I'm just trying to catch this over here before it dries up on me. It leaves me hard edges there. Okay. So let's see. Actually, I think this is all shadow back in there. I'm reading that a little bit wrong. Okay. And then let's come in with a little more of that that rosy color along there. And this reflected light coming up from the bottom here of, I guess it's reflecting off this this vase over here, or planter is what it is, I guess. So I want to catch that really pretty little bit of bright color. And also over into here. Skip over that light. So and then this is foliage coming out here, so I'm just going to kind of indicate that. Notice that I'm kind of leaving the detail at the edges of the shape, and that's all people need to recognize that as a foliage there. You don't need a lot of detail on the inner shape of the shadow. Inner shape of the foliage, I should say. Okay, and that. I'm going to let that bleed back into the edge of that little planter, and touch that with my. I'm going to just continue down, clean this up just a little bit here first. That's really in sunlight, but it's got that beautiful red to it, which I want to capture there. And I'll come back and do a little more to clean that up later too. Want a little bit of a shadow in under to let you know that that's the inside of the planter there. Okay, so bringing kind of re-identifying my puddles here, just adding a little more pigment into them. They get messed up as I go, but I can keep adding to them and re-identifying them. So I want to come down into here with this shadow. And this I am going to do maybe more to the value 5 level, because as much as you can to not have to come back into an area of shadow is really, it's just really better. It'll just stay more colorful, and this shadow is coming all the way over there. And I'm even going to pop in some yellow into this shadow. I want it just to read very colorful and still have some power to it, but just not overpowering like the shadow is in this photograph. I want to pick up this bead at the bottom so I don't blossom back up into the painting. And I also feel like this is more of a soft edge on this shadow area here. As well as over into here. I want to soften that a little bit, even though that's going to come back as a white there where the sun's hitting that planter. And again, you see how I'm trying to connect everything so that I don't have a cut out and pasted on area here. I want just a little more oomph to that. And that shadow's kind of got some jaggedy shapes from the foliage up in there. And I'll probably come back in this this area down in here later on and maybe strengthen the shadows on that a little bit. Okay, but let's keep going over in here with I am getting a little bit of a blossom here, but I don't think that's going to bother me too much because I want that diffused and kind of blurred out in that area anyway, so I think it's going to be okay. Okay. I did want to get the red in here too for these flowers, which will kind of keep their identity. I don't want to blur those out too much at this point. And there's going to be this green under in here and these other little flowers and stuff in there. And I'll come back with a final darker value there too to connect that in. But right now I'm just kind of trying to get all this area in shadow in and Gonna have a nice hard edge against the pillar, so that's gonna stand out. And now I'm just trying to get in some of these kind of little lacy areas in here that are making the shadows of the branches of the trees and everything back in there. Continue it down on into here. Okay. And again, I don't really want a totally hard edge there. But there's these wonderful little chunks of light over in here that I want to make sure I get in here and keep those alive without painting over those. I want to make them a little more organically shaped. And then back in here, there's another pillar back there, but it's really in this little piece of light right here is really important, so I don't want to mow that down. Something back there. And probably that's going to come right up to that edge of the wall. And so I've got a pretty deep shadow coming down across there and going up into this foliage up into here. So keep that coming. And I'm just kind of letting that drip back down into this other area of shadow, but letting it just stay, all those really beautiful colors just melding in there. Okay, and then over in here, I'm want to continue the darker foliage up in here, and I'm not really caring if that's green or not per se. I'm just wanting to get that value in there. And then down into here. There's just all these different layers of the leaves coming through here, which will get worked on a little bit more when I come back in with the next layers of color, but I'm still staying on that, for the most part, on the light side of that value scale. And this is pretty over in here because you've got these little things of light that are on top of the gate. I want to make sure I don't cover up all those pretty lights in there. Okay. So under here, I'm seeing these little peaks of a brighter purple or a nice color under there. So I'm gonna put down a pretty bright color underneath, even though I know that that's going to be pretty much all in shadow back in there. But I want to keep those little pieces of the light showing in the bars back there. And I'll do that by painting over it and letting these poke out behind. So right now that looks very inaccurate, but it will look better when I come back in and do paint over it. Okay, it's too early to come over that with the dark yet. I've got to let that dry. And then I'll show you what I mean by painting back behind it there. Okay, and then there's this kind of very, very pale value on that wall back in there. Okay, well, let's let that dry, and then we'll come back into it with the second wash, where we'll start picking up our darker pigments and get laying in some of these really deep values. Right now, we're just focusing on connecting everything together that is not in light. Keeping the shapes all connected and blended together, keeping the color juicy and wet, and I think we've accomplished that. So we'll give that a minute to dry and come back to the painting. Okay, well, while this is still drying, I'm going to take a minute and clean my palette and get ready for the next stage of the painting, which will be the darker values, adding to the painting and deepening the shadows and other areas that need some definition or some punches of darks. And for this next triad, I'll be using actually for this next triad, I think I'm going to continue on with with the manganese blue. I may use a little bit of the ultramarine blue, but I'm kind of liking this combination of color, and I may just stick with that triad, only using the pigments more concentrated. So, just waiting for that to lay back down flat, but I can start working on this side of the painting, I guess, which I'll do. So again, I'll get a nice pile of manganese blue, and then another pile of ultramarine blue, and then my alizarin crimson, and then I'm also going to, I think, bring in some of the transparent oxide red as a red in this triad too, or a yellow. So I can bend that color either way to use it as a yellow or a red in my triad. And then I'll probably be dipping back into the yellow ochre as well. So I'm liking pretty much what we've got going here. It's still pretty undefined, which is the way I wanted in this first wash. And now it's time to start pulling things together, start adding more definition, and pulling out the elements that I want to focus on. And of course, the main statement I'm wanting to make on this is this beautiful pillar in the sun here with these flowers on either side and the foliage over here. It's just a beautiful statement of light and shadow. So I'm gonna come in now with a dark under here to start setting off what's happening under that area in there. But I'm still trying to keep that pretty pretty colorful in there. And I'm going to pop in a little bit of the yellow. And then it's going to come right up against the edge of this this wall. And being careful to go over that, and paint over that beautiful white shape there. And here's where I'm going to bring in a little bit of that that really warm sort of sienna in the shadows here, as they're coming up against the what is that thing called? The flower pot. And now in this stage, the painting slows down. I do more thinking and a little more analyzing of things here, because now I am going to try to get things to be looking like what they're supposed to be. But remember, the more abstractly I paint this thing, the more realistic it's going to look at the end of the painting session. So I've decided my shadow is going to need to be darkened down in here. So I'm just coming down here again with the same triad of color, and bringing it right across that shadow again. But see the color in there and how that fused diffuse down into the shadow. And then I will also come back and soften some of this shadow in here. And then I'll come back and define that pillar too. I can do that by just maybe wiping out see where this, so you can see that there's an object back in there, but it's still just part of the shadow. And that's a nice way to do things that are in shadow. Wipe out a little bit to show what you're trying to describe. And while that's still wet, I think I'll kind of put in that bottom part of the column and just let that bleed down into the bottom. Because your eye's not really seeing sharp edges in this shadow. The sharp edges are going to be up in here. I'm just going to work across on this little seems like I've left that standing out a little too much there, so coming back into, I'll let it bleed up into the column a little more. Sorry if I'm not making a whole lot of sense. It's hard talking and painting at the same time, but we're trying. Okay, so here's my I'm going to blend that in so that it's not popping out too much, but there is really still a nice white on that. I don't want to go into this while it's wet too much, or I'm going to end up with some mud in here, so got to be kind of careful to not overdo this. But those are pretty strong shadows down in there, so I do want to let them speak out a little bit. Okay, I want to get a nice little shadow under here too, where that's just kind of reminding myself that I don't want to really hard edge there too much. Okay. this may be dry enough that I can sort of indicate that that's the base of this pillar thingy. And there's still a little more to that shadow in here that I think maybe I want to put a little cadmium in there, cadmium red, to keep that pretty terracotta look. Okay. Now I'm going to work back up in through here and leave that area for a little bit. And I want a little bit of a pink in these flowers up in here. I'm just going to go back in with these. I'm going to bring in some sap green too into this darker wash. And start working some of that in here. I don't want to get too dark with that foliage in there yet, but it is pretty dark now. And I want to start working around these little leaves now. So see how I'm painting behind those to let them continue to shine through that area. So now you see those, that little leaf pattern coming out. And now this is really setting off my center of interest in the pillar there, because that's where I really want that. My darkest dark is right up against that. Okay, and then I'm feeling like I am going to want to have more of a dark back in here too. And I love how there's these little jagged things that are coming over onto the wall that's right there. But I still want to keep color back in there, so I keep pulling in elements of the triad again. Making sure that those are still identifiable. Okay, and then up in here is much, much darker than I've got it right now, so I do want to work up into there with some more darks. But I'm painting behind all of these little areas here and want to leave some of that really beautiful yellow in there. Some of these little veiny things I think I'll try to put in there so you can tell that that's a vine thing up in there. I don't know what it is, but that just kind of let people know that that's what's up there. And this is not really in sunlight there either, so, but I would like it to be a little more rosy. That color of that sandstone or whatever that is. I'll punch that back just a little more in the background there. Okay, I'm going to leave that area now and work up in here. I want that nice terracotta color up in here again on the flower pot that's sitting up on top of the pillar. But I want to make sure I leave some of that foliage that's coming down on it. And over in here as well. There's that nice little piece of light, the reflected light coming on the bottom of it. And then I want to put in some darks up in there where this foliage is up in here. Probably want a little bit of, a little hint of purple in there too. So see now I'm describing this top layer by painting the foliage underneath. I want to leave kind of a crisp edge on this side of the vase over here, but still leave all those little leaves coming out and around there. And this right in here should not be having a area of light right in the middle there. I need to catch that edge there. Oh, and that wasn't quite dry enough, so I let that bleed too much. Clean it up a little bit and add some more of the transparent oxide in it. Okay, that's a little better, but this edge we want to show up more. Okay, let's work back in here. I'm going to re-wet this. And come onto that with some, it's mostly light back in there, mostly foliage in the sun, so and then that, there's some nice darks that set off the wall back in here too. Right, maybe up in here to okay. Just kind of smushing the paint around a little bit here so it doesn't get that feeling of pasted out and pasted on and cut out. And back in here, it's pretty dark again. A lot of dark. Dark foliage down in there. Okay. Okay, and that's going to come over in here. I want these pretty shadows coming down in here, I really want to preserve. And we've got this little element of I still want this to punch out a little bit more. Like that's foliage in the sun right there. Okay. And now underneath that, okay, we've got this other little layer of underneath foliage. So I'm going to try to bring that in with still kind of a medium green back in there, so we know we're still in the foliage area. And then that lovely stuff, we want to just pull down into the shadow area. So let's give ourselves a nice and not really nice purple or bluish something. You can kind of see I'm not decided totally what to do here, but I think this is what we need. There's a real nice start to set this little stuff off in here, because that is just a beautiful little dance of light and shadow back in there. On that wall. I want to be careful to preserve it. I want some purer blue color down in here. Now over in here, I want to show you what I was trying to talk about with this doorway. let's kind of get to a point where I can stop on this shadow coming down. Okay. So over in here, I'm going to start identifying this a little bit better. So those were positive strokes, and now I'm going to do negative. So what I'm talking about here is I'm going to start painting behind those bars and leaving some of that really pretty yellow showing through in places. And also where this comes across horizontally too. And I don't want to do it everywhere, but and here's another place where we want the positive to show through right there. Okay, so that kind of gives us that indication of these rods, iron things sticking out there. And the play that we've got going between the negative and the positive shape is pretty important. Okay, and then down here, we've got some more darks coming down through here. So we're getting closer to wrapping this thing up. But we've still got a little bit of work to do. And again, as I was saying earlier, that the edge of the shape is where you kind of want to put more of the detail, indicating that there's some foliage shadows that you're looking at here. But it's really when you get this darker value brushed in that you begin to really see this thing coming together as a pattern. And it's just that pattern of lights and darks that makes the image appear real. I'm just going to strengthen the red on these flowers and come in with a little bit more of a dark, got to get a dark value in underneath some of the foliage in here. A little bit of that's coming into the sun. So I'm just trying to define this a little bit more. And I still need a little bit more warmth in this foliage here in places. And it's feeling like it's a little too cool. So I need to warm it up a bit. That's better. Okay. Looking a little lopsided over there, so let's get a little more green in the back there. Okay, now got to wrap this up. Well, thank you for joining us today. I think I accomplished pretty much what I set out to do in keeping the shadows colorful and linked together. It's definitely not a masterpiece, but it's a demonstration on how to keep the shadows alive in a painting. So thank you, and we'll look forward to another segment again next time.